We all know the story, right? A favorite son, that famous coat, some very jealous brothers, and this wild journey from a pit to a palace. But you know, the story of Joseph is so much more than a classic tale we heard growing up. If we just peel back the first layer, we find this incredible, deep story hiding just beneath the surface. So, let's dive in.
The whole thing really boils down to one central question. Are we just reading a tragic story about a dysfunctional family that happens to get a lucky happy ending? Or is there something much, much bigger going on here? Could this actually be a divine rescue mission, just disguised as total chaos?
To get to the bottom of that, we have to start with the biggest theme in the entire narrative, this idea that a hidden, divine plan was actually at work from the very beginning. And let's not mince words here. What his brothers did, it was just awful. They were consumed by jealousy, and they sold their own brother into slavery. It's a brutal, malicious act. On a purely human level, it's evil. There's no way to sugarcoat that. But was that the final word? You know, was that horrible act the period at the end of the sentence? Or was it maybe just the start of a whole new paragraph nobody saw coming? Well, years later, Joseph himself gives us the answer. He's looking his brothers right in the eye and he says this. He totally acknowledges what they did. You guys meant this for evil. But then he reveals this higher purpose that was at play, but God meant it for good. So the incredible takeaway here is that God didn't just show up to clean up their mess. He was actually weaving their evil act into his own good plan the whole time. This big idea actually has a name. It's called divine providence. And it's this core belief that God is in control of everything, able to work through our human choices, the good ones and the bad ones, to get to his ultimate good purpose. Joseph's life is pretty much the poster child for this principle in action.
But here's the thing. God's grand plan didn't mean Joseph was just some passive pawn on a chessboard. His personal response to all this suffering is just as crucial to the story. We have to see how his character was really forged in the fire of these trials. This wasn't just about what God was doing around Joseph, but also what he was doing in him.
Just listen to this. This is Joseph's response when he's being tempted in Potiphar's house. Now notice who he's most worried about offending. It's not his boss, Potiphar, it's God. I mean, even after being betrayed by his family and sold into slavery, his #1 loyalty is still to God. That tells you everything. His integrity wasn't based on his circumstances. It was rooted in something much deeper. That unwavering inner compass is what set him up for everything that was still to come. So Joseph had this rock-solid faithfulness to God, but what about his relationship with people? Specifically, the very people who had wronged him so terribly. This brings us to one of the most powerful parts of the story. Forgiveness. You have to picture this scene. It is pure drama. There's a famine, and his brothers show up in Egypt, literally begging for food. They have no clue they are bowing down to the brother they sold off years ago. Joseph has their lives in his hands. He has all the power in the world to get his revenge. And right here, we see these two sides of Joseph's character just come together beautifully. His faithfulness to God, you could call that his vertical relationship, is what gave him the strength to forgive people, his horizontal relationships. Because he got that he was part of God's bigger story, he was free to give grace instead of demanding justice. He resists sinning against God, and then he offers mercy to his brothers, kissing them, weeping with them. You see, one flows directly from the other. Okay, now let's pull the camera back. Way back. We've seen the personal story and the family drama, but Joseph's story also has this massive, national, and even prophetic meaning. This is so much bigger than just him and his brothers. Think about this. On his deathbed, Joseph makes his family swear an oath to carry his bones out of Egypt when God finally brings them back to the Promised Land. Why would he do that? Because he was absolutely sure that God would keep his promises. He knew his life wasn't just some random soap opera. It was a key chapter in the story of Israel's destiny. And even more than that, his whole life served as a kind of shadow, a preview of a much greater Savior who was still to come. This biblical pattern actually has a name. It's called typology. And it's basically a way of seeing how certain people or events in the Old Testament are like a blueprint or a foreshadowing of something or someone way bigger in the New Testament. Think of it like a movie trailer for the main event. Now, when you put Joseph's life next to the life of Christ, the parallels are, well, they're absolutely stunning. A beloved son, betrayed by his own, sold for silver. He suffers unjustly but is then raised up to a position of power where he becomes the savior of his people, providing the bread that saves them from death. Sound familiar? It's supposed to. Joseph's story is an incredible preview of Christ, who was resurrected to save the entire world from the famine of sin.
So you see how the story just keeps expanding? The lens gets wider and wider. It starts as a personal trial, just one guy's story of suffering. Then it becomes about a family's reconciliation. Then we see it's really about a whole nation's destiny. And then finally we realize it's a shadow, a type, of the entire world's salvation. Every layer we peel back reveals something deeper and more profound.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thought, a really big question for our own lives. Joseph's story forces us to ask, what if the things that feel so unjust, the betrayals and hardships we go through, aren't actually the end of the story? What if, just maybe, like Joseph, we're living in a single chapter of a much larger, unseen story of redemption? It's something to think about.